Welcome to Bulwarks and Bulldust. I'm John Curnow. Right beside me is Mark Elkington, and I, for one, can't wait to get him round to the boatworks and into the captain's chair. So let's get on to it.
All right, well, welcome to the show where we navigate the world of yachting and boating, and we do our best to separate the bulldust from the gold dust. Today, we've got a very special guest with us, Mark Elkington, who's navigated the world of boating from humble beginnings to a very large and successful local and regional business in Asia Pacific. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks, James. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, it's always good to catch up. But I suppose, if we look at how you started, I mean, that's what I'm really interested in. If I was a young person in the industry and I'm looking at someone like you who's created quite a successful business, I mean, how would I go about that now? How would I go from being a 22-year-old guy who wants to build his own successful marine sales business?
Look, I don't think the process has changed in 100 years. First of all, you need a vision and passion.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to believe in what you want to do. If you want to go and race yachts around the world and you want to be the best at it, you don't give up. And I think people prove they can do that. But I've always loved boats. I started cleaning up vomit on ferries when I was 12 for $3.96 an hour. It was my first job back in the 70s. And then I ended up putting bags on ferries and then driving ferries and, getting ticketed and, I love the marine industry. But my father said to me one day after a trip to the Whitsundays, he said, "You've got to go to the Whitsundays." I was born and bred in Perth. First career was a crayfisherman out of Savannah's in Western Australia. And on the off-season, he was driving courier vehicles and I was helping him move boxes to make a few extra bob for him. And he said, "You've got to go to the Whitsundays. Don't go back crayfishing. You'll see this whole world." And I did that. I went to the Whitsundays in 1989 and I never left. I landed on that island, started scrubbing decks of charter boats and learning the charter industry. We ended up, myself and a mate, Ziggy Drews in Melbourne, acquired the old Hamilton Island Yacht Charter business in 1993, 94. Got together with old Peter Dieball, and if you remember Peter Dieball from Newport City Sailing, and Toby Whitfield, we came together as Sunsail and we created the Sunsail brand. So it's a passion to be around boats. And so my first, from fisherman to charter operator, charter businesses, you've got to sell boats in your fleet. So moving boats into the fleet, I found that was pretty exciting. The boat sales side of it, I led that through the Sunsail era. We started with 4 boats and sold that business in 2000 with 55 boats. Didn't make a buck. There's no money in charter. We didn't make $1 out of it. But there was something special in the yacht sales side of it. And I bought the first Fontaine Pajot into Australia in 97 into that fleet, the first lagoon into Australia, set up Hayman Island Sailing in 97. And that was where my passion for boat sales started to kind of, the relationships you built with people that I inspired to. These guys have got $1 million and they're buying a boat. It's like in those days, $1 million boat was a special boat to sell. So, when you're 25, 26-year-old kid, you're kind of feeling pretty tall.
Yeah, I'm still $2 million short of that $1 million boat, but anyway.
And so you got commissions from selling those boats into the fleet?
Yes, and not the commissions that we are able to earn today. They were a bit tighter and a bit tougher because we were a charter operator. We weren't a fully fledged dealer promoting a brand. We were working with selected shipyards, Fontaine Pajot. That's where I met Fontaine Pajot in 1997. Jean-Francois Fontaine. In those days, he was hands-on. He was, he had glue on his fingers. He was an amazing guy, very passionate. Yves Pajot, the founders.
Yeah.
And to see what that business has done over that era is incredible. When Jeannot bought Lagoon in probably 98, 99, that was where I had to make a choice to go Lagoon or FB. And there was something special about the Fontaine family, family-run business. Really, it wasn't corporate. It was really sit around the dinner table, have a wine and talk about boats.
Well, that's interesting because I've seen the way you built your business up, and it's a big family.
It is same. You know, when I came back, when we sold Sunsail, and I had a 2-year exit from the industry, as you do in these acquisitions. You can't play the game for a few years. You've got to go to the rest. 2003, I kicked off again with Jean-Francois Fontaine and Fontaine Peugeot, and that was in a 20-foot donger in Mooloolaba. Didn't even have a window in it, I don't think, at the time, but we did put a window in. And
that's code for a 20-foot container, by the way, for people in other parts of the world that might not be quite up on the regional lingo.
A shipping container, correct? Yeah. And I think the rent was exorbitant. It was $300 a month or something. It was like, how am I going to afford this?
So you're running your offices, your whole operation out of a shipping container.
So that was the relaunch of kind of in those days it was EC Marine. That was we were known by at the time.
Who was we? Was there more than you involved at that stage?
No, it was just myself involved, but I had a mate who had a few bob to buy a stock boat.
Perfect.
That I said, look, come on, can you help me get this first stock boat into the country? And he was Cohen, so EC, and he worked with me for a number of years, and he's now the dealer in the Caribbean. So we've had a long relationship. He used to be a client with me at the Sunsail business. He used to have a boat there, and so it's funny how things evolve. But in that little shipping container, we went and bought a beautiful old timber table, stuck it out the front, built an awning over it, made it look pretty. And I remember the day going, well, we were signing a contract with, I think it might have been Barry Costa, the local buyer, and I'd done my numbers. I said, we did our $10 million of sales out of that container on that table. And that's 10 million we've signed here. And that gave me the confidence to go and rent an office next door in the yacht club. So,
and is that the office that you had up until COVID times?
Yes, correct. So we started there with, then I had a contractor doing service. That's Michael Crook, Nod. And I said to him one day, I said, what else do you do, Nod, in your day? He said, nothing, work for you. And I said, well, how about come on board? And so he joined me, and I made sure we had a plan together, and he became a shareholder of the business. Then we needed a financial person to help, and we needed another sales guy or girl, a sales help. It was getting a bit busy. And one of my boat owners, one of the clients said, look, I know a couple who are cruising in the Pacific. And it was Richard and Jane Kilburn. I don't know if you remember them.
No.
From the old days.
No, I don't.
So I rang them, and they sailed into Mooloolaba. They sailed around on an old 45-foot cruising yacht with no fridge, and, they were soul of the earth. He was a great salesman from the computer industry, and she was worked with Deloitte's, and they both had a gap year. Sailed in, and I did a deal with them, gave them some a shareholding in the company. She became the financial person. He became the other salesperson with me, and we just had another growth. We were selling 18, 20 new boats a year, and Patrick was a Katana Vigilo, another guy.
Yeah.
Patrick, I met him at the boat shows here in Australia as Katana. So Katana were always parked in next to us, and, I'd always welcome them, and Patrick, he inspired me. He just had this wonderful, loud, booming voice, and great guy. But at lunchtime, they shut the boat and all had lunch at the boat show. And I said, guys, you can't do this in Australia. They'd locked the boat off. Out came the cigarettes and the wine and the cheese, and they'd sit there and go, you can't do this. You're not going to sell these boats. And sure enough, 2 years they did this, and eventually, long story short, we took over Katana. Yeah. Patrick ended up coming out to Australia, long story, we created multi-hull solutions in about 2007, 2008. We created the brand Multi-Hull Solutions because we were doing Fontaine Peugeot, we were doing Katana, we were doing Dolphin out of Spain. And that was kind of an interesting time, and that was forced on us by the GFC. The GFC had just hit, and none of the shipyards wanted us to represent more than themselves. It's like, if you're going to represent Katana, you can't represent us. We have to. If you don't want to play, we're going to set this choice, a choice of catamarans, all complementary, not competitive. The Katana is very different to a Fontaine. I don't know if you remember the Dolphin brand, lovely boat.
I do, yeah.
In their day. They offered something for everyone, and that's how we kind of we proved their theory wrong, that combining some brands and presenting a broader offer gave customers more choice, and the business really took off. COVID for us, as you know, Australia didn't go into recession in COVID. We had a softening, but it wasn't extreme like some parts of the world. I think Poland, Australia were the only two countries, I might be wrong, that didn't go into a recession. So that was a real short dip. The exchange rate fell apart, down to 48 cents to the dollar. That was tough. But that cycle was
brief, yeah.
I guess the other thing too is in a lot of ways, if you look at the original charter side of your activities, all of that was mono-hull, and then you arrived very early in the multi-hull scenario, which has just continued to take off, and so too has the sabbatical type kind of, I'm taking a year off, my turning to 5 or whatever for some people. That's also taken off, and here you are very much in that zone, working in that space. But I think it's important to also realise that, it wasn't long before power came along to complement the sale. So here you are, power and sale, mono and multi. It was a really great place to be because you were able to reflect so many different things, and then, becoming the Yacht Sales Co, which is the latest evolution, allows you to be able to not only retail the boat out, but then take it back in and broker it out, as well as get the person into the next boat. It's been a really great cycle, and it was by plan, it wasn't by accident.
Look, yeah, to a degree, no, it wasn't by plan. It was by accident, John. We decided we wanted to be a specialist in the multi-hull market. That was what I identified needed energy. We used to stand at boat shows in Sydney in 2006, and I remember how people would come on board and go, "You wouldn't sail this anywhere apart from Sydney Harbour, would you?" It's like, this is a boat. We're a Bahia 46, beautiful old boat, or the Belize 43, some of the old Fontaine Peugeots. And go, this boat will take you anywhere in the world safely. But it'll tip over if it blew 30 knots. We did from 2000 and probably, early 2000 to, I reckon the culture changed about 2012, 2013. We stopped having the conversations about multi-hulls are not capable to go to sea. They're fantastic boats. You don't want to go to Windward in a multi-hull in 35 knots. That's not what you buy them for. But they'll do it if you want to, you break yourself before you break the boat. But, they're very capable boats. And I guess what multi-hulls, we wanted to stay a specific specialist in multi-hulls. We started Multi-Hull Solutions because of that reason. We got forced by a lot of our owners to help sell their boat to upgrade. We never wanted to get into the brokerage. That was by accident. And, helping people sell boats. The more we grew, next thing I knew, we'd sold 100 boats. We had 50 boats coming back to sell. And we thought, okay, we've got to do this. And Patrick Gillo took on the flag and said, I'll run this. I think this has got legs on it. And our brokerage business is, we handle 150 brokerage boats a year today, growing to 200 boats a year. It's a huge part of our business.
So how important are brokerage boats for the cash flow side of the business?
It's 25% of our revenue is brokerage.
But it's the speed with which the transactions happen, which is
you
different.
don't have to carry stock. You don't have to, you don't have all the risk. Running a brokerage business is complex, but it's very low cost you don't even really need an office, but what we have done differently to others is we've set up what we call an engine room in our business, and that's a group of people that when we list a boat, we don't just go, "Oh, John, great, you want us to sell your boat, flick us your keys, yeah, what do you want, sign that, see you later." The process is quite thorough. A lot of boat owners get a bit disgruntled with it. We want to know proof of ownership. We want to make sure that it's not owned by you and your wife and you're not selling it because you're leaving your bride, and that's happened. We've been caught in these situations where that's why we've built this today. So we have a stringent process. It's ensured. We know that you've got to sign a stat declaration to say, "I know my boat has not had a major structural incident. It's back on." We want to represent your boat fairly to the new buyer. It's not. We don't want to sell the wrong. We're happy to sell a boat that's been beached and had a repair to a customer as long as they're aware of it. That's something that's really important in our business, and that's why I think our reputation and our growth has been so dynamic around Asia Pacific. Is people have understood what our offering, what they're being told is what they're getting.
Transparency.
It catches you in the end in this industry.
Yeah.
Just to make sure it's ensured that we're not going to end up doing a sea trial with someone and, that there's an exposure if somebody rips their fingers through the winch and they're a surgeon while they're doing a sea trial on a brokerage boat, that we're not going to have a problem, that we know we've got 20 million bucks of cover for that. We know that our policy stands up over yours, or your policy stands up over ours if you go and move your boat on the weekend during the campaign because you want to go for a sale, which you might want to do. So it's quite a complex back end, and we also manage the trust accounts and we've sent settlements to people for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it hasn't made their account. We've had because we list boats around the world. We had an English owner and who had his boat in Thailand. The buyer was in Sydney, bought the boat, settled. We settled to Barclays in England. Cyber crime, this is about 6 years ago. It was only about 300 US, but the money never made it. But we settled anyway. That's our mistake.
So all these protocols, they're your IP basically. You've developed these over time.
So but from learning the lesson.
Yeah.
If I send you, Wallace, 300 grand for your boat and said, "Great, we're settled," and you said, "Well, hang on, it's not in my bank account." And I say, "Well, we sent it, it's not in ours." You're on your own, bad luck. What are you going to think about us? Now now we have double security, tax, everything. What you've got to do to get your money out of a boat sale now, it's a partnership. It's kind of saying, "Sorry, I know this is painful, but every time we send you something, you got to enter in a code on your phone. It's a process to get."
That process makes sure that the customers looked after, also the seller, and also importantly you as well, so you can weed out, I guess, the wheat from the chaff, and make sure the product that you've got is the very best product that you're holding at that time.
Yeah, and look, we've got a big responsibility. If you give us your $1 million boat to sell, we've got a responsibility to professionally handle it, to make sure that when we do execute a sale, that the funds are safe and secure, and everyone walks away with a great transaction. And the industry, unfortunately, will get caught out. There's a lot of people in this industry who don't run trust accounts, and they got God knows what they're using your deposit to pay rents. I mean, I've seen it. But one thing we are very good at doing is process, and we don't spend a buck of anyone's money until it's earned, because the industry's this industry, you never know when it can park, and when you can run out of cash, you've got to have reserves in this market.
I think, Mark, it was really interesting. You just made a comment previously about APAC, but you're now in 11 countries, which includes Europe. So in actual fact, it's almost a bit unfair. It might be calling Bulldust on that and not call you regional anymore. You're actually global.
Yeah, it is a global brand, isn't it?
Yeah, look, okay, good point, John. We are Asia.
I've got to get one back after getting the other one wrong. Come on.
Okay, and I want to go back to the one about the monohull, multi-hull, and I'll come back to Montenegro. When Fontaine-Peugeot Group bought Dufour and approached us to handle this new portfolio, that was when I had to really sit down.
About 5 years ago, just for the listeners.
Yeah, that was when we had to sit down and say, well, we can't do this under multi-hull solutions. We're not going to start a startup business and start a monohull business. It was either say no or go, okay, I think it is time. I remember we sat down and saying, well, what else are we, what could we do with this? And it was, we sat down with some key people and said, well, I've given, Joe Blow broker in Newcastle $500,000 a commission listings last year because we don't sell monohulls. I've given so-and-so, we were giving all the monohulls away to the industry. And we thought, you know what, there is actually a business here. And that's when we decided, let's not lose our specialist approach. We have a team of multi-hull specialists, sail and power. Let's build a team of sailing, mono and mono specialists. And that's how we grew. And that's how we became Yacht Sales Co from Multi-Hull Solutions. And that was kind of Multi-Hull Solutions. We had 5 offices in, 4 countries maybe. And the Yacht Sales Co now has 15 offices in 11 countries. So that's...
And it's not stopping there either, is it?
No, and you're right. Coming back to your point, we have been an Asia-Pacific focused business, but we are now in Montenegro, we're in Panama, and we are working to a new joint venture in America. We'll become, the Yacht Sales Co will have, our goal is to have 60 brokers in 20 countries by 2026. And I think
that's next year,
we don't mess around, Wallace. But again, that growth is through established businesses coming together.
So there's growth by acquisition
through
partnerships,
merger and acquisitions.
Yeah.
We're still working through that process, but very good friends who have a like-minded like business to us in the US, and we realise how travelled our buyers are. We have people in New Zealand fly to Singapore to buy a boat and sail back to New Zealand. We have Aussies go to the US and buy a boat and sail it back. We have clients in Europe who fly to Hong Kong and buy a boat and ship it back. It's people don't buy boats in the backyard anymore, particularly in the market we're in, which is our average sales around $1 million boat, new and used, probably more 2 million new, high, 800 to 1 million secondhand. The buyers in that market, they're not afraid to throw a boat on a ship for $100,000 and get home.
Yeah, but they're also, I see you run a program where you take the owners to the factory to collect their yachts.
60% of our new boat business is handed over at the factory door.
60%, wow, that's a massive number.
We only land in Australia of our new boat business, maybe 20% of the boats we sell annually land in this country. There's probably 250, 300 heading this way if they make it. But, a lot of people they want to do a sabbatical, you mentioned earlier. They want to have a year off. I can count on, I couldn't count them on my hands and fingers how many people had a year off to do the med. I'm going to do the med and then I'll sell the boat or I'll get it shipped home. And then 5 years later, they haven't even left the med. Yeah. And their kids are all flying over and they've got a whole new, their lifestyle's totally changed.
Yeah. And there are other motivations aside from exploring another part of the world?
Look, when you look at a $2 million boat at a factory door like La Rochelle, where you can sail the med, you can, there's your $2 million cost. If you want that boat back in Australia, by the time you paid shipping, taxes, GST, that's a $2.7 million boat. Now, and so many people spend that extra $700,000, park it in their marina in Sydney and go back to work. And then they pay marina fees, insurance, all these overheads, and they use it on a Sunday. I think a lot of people see that and I think could go, we don't have to work. We can save $700,000 on this boat and we can put that into a year, 18 months lifestyle and go cruising.
You buy a lot of airfares for that.
Huge amount.
You can, but also that'll change if they do decide to bring it all the way back.
Yes.
The fees are different, aren't they?
Well, a boat depreciates, so by the time they do, if they eventually bring it home, yes, their taxes reduce. Generally, they'll sail it back slowly. You know, they might just come back to work for 6 months, winterise it in Greece or in Turkey somewhere, and then they'll go back and they'll sail it, do the Atlantic, bit of time in the Caribbean, then do Panama, which is fantastic if you haven't done Panama. That's why we have an office in Panama now to help direct our cruising. You know, we've got 300-400 people cruising around the world on new boats we've handed over the last 20 years. That's a caption point to say, right, now what's your plan? You know, do you need advice? You know, we've got offices in Tahiti, Fiji, New Caledonia, New Zealand, and Southeast Asia. Now that's the end of all your trade routes. So if you're a sailor, you're going to end up in one of those places. And, you know, usually we're capturing you to say, look, if you sell your boat here, you'll get X amount of dollars for this boat. If you import it into Australia, you're going to get more, but, you know, you might not get as much as what you pay in the taxes. So if you're not going to use the boat, it's a good time to sell or sail to New Zealand if you're a Kiwi. So we capture the boats, we have a good conversation with our clients, and that's how our brokerage business has grown. We capture them, and at least if they do sail into Australia and decide to keep the boat, they're educated. Instead of coming back and saying, why didn't you tell me to sell the boat in Tahiti before I paid all this tax and duty and GST and so.
So you were looking at, I think you mentioned doubling your scale. Is that right? Doubling by 2026, which is next year?
Our brokerage business.
Brokerage business. Yep. So obviously a very, very well established company now. Does that still present some growing pains being able to achieve that sort of growth? And the second part to that question would be, what sort of with your brand ethos and the way you train people and bringing all these new people on, how much of your brand essence do you take into these new organisations, and how much can you dictate how people operate?
Look, that's a good question. The challenge we have is changing some cultures to align with the ethos of the Yacht Sales Co, which is transparency, you know, don't bullshit. Honesty. You know, this boat has run aground, it's been repaired, there's a survey report, it's a damn good boat for the price. If you want a boat that's never had an issue, you're going to pay another 300 grand. That's 2 years younger. You know, that honesty has got to resonate through our business, and it has done very well. And I think all our clients, if you look at the testimonials on our website, I think there's more testimonials than any website I've seen. We are very strong in that character, but to grow this at the pace we want to grow it, we're not bringing in new people. We're bringing in like-minded businesses that are established, that see the value of a change in brand and are connecting to a powerhouse, you know, back-end system that works, you know, documentations that flow, processes that are proven to work, where you just jump on and go, well, I don't have to, as a sales consultant in this industry, sit home at night and put all my photos in line and write up my brief, and I basically collect it all and throw it over my shoulder and get on with finding a buyer for my client. That's where your time is best spent, is trying to find a buyer for your boat. That's our job. Not for our key salespeople to spend half a week at a desk resizing photos and trying to come up with the brief and trying to work out, I need an insurance document, and hang on, does John own it or his wife? And we've got a team of people who do that. So get the listing, get the information together and the contact over your shoulder, get out there and find a buyer. And that's what we're trying to, that's what people like about our business.
I think in talking with you too, I think the one thing that resonated with me is probably your ability to say no to certain aspects of business or in relationships as well. I think you're very good at building and maintaining relationships, but I think equally knowing what path to take and what path not to take from what I understand from what you were saying earlier.
Look,
as well.
it is. We don't like to say no to a listing, but we've got to. If we don't know the background of the boat build, we won't. We don't want to take on a boat we know nothing about. So we have some basic tick the box that we go. Hang on, who's the designer? Don't know. It was built by John Smith, a boilermaker, in his backyard in Logan. Okay. Beautiful boat, but I can't put a family on this and send them around the world because this is not proven. I think, I'd rather you go with someone else who is happy to handle that kind of boat. It's not been arrogant. It's been, to me, honest with what we're trying to say to people. If you buy a boat from us, we can guarantee you, to the best of our ability, we've done our homework, we know this will do the job.
Yeah, but I guess not even just the brokerage, even in the new sales, knowing what relationships to form and what one wants to maintain as well.
Absolutely.
More importantly,
look, very much so. There's an interesting path in this industry when you've said to a client, "Sorry, I can't sell you a boat because I can't meet your expectations." It's a hard discussion to have, and it's interesting to see a lot of my team say, "You're joking. You're not going to handle a boat sale with that particular client." I said, we're never going to meet their expectations. Their expectations are, for a start, the boat they need to really buy is that boat, not our boat. But they seem to want this boat, but it's not going to do what you want it to do. But then you're not listening. So I can't do it. We've done that once a year. We walk away from a sale because it's not worth it. It's not worth it. It's the quickest way to get someone out of boating, to dislike your brand, to dislike your people, is when they believe that they've taken off out of the heads here and gone north on a boat that they go, "This is not what we imagined." And I said, "Well, we told you. I've done it. I won't do it again."
But that strength of relationship also applies then to who you represent as well. Clearly, things that, you thought might work haven't necessarily worked out, but you've also had the ability to stand up and be counted for it and gone, no longer do we believe that this is the path that doesn't align with what we're doing. So again, you're strengthening your whole discussion around we stand by what we mean and we mean what we say. You've done that not only downward with buy, but also vertically and upward with the manufacturer.
No, look, totally. And, we are fortunate having the brands represent, we've been with them not just for a few years, we've been with them for 20, 30 years. They're long relationships. And they really appreciate the feedback from our clients. Remember the first boats we bought in the early 2000s or late 90s, there was no barbecue on a boat. It's like you can't, and they couldn't understand why you needed a barbecue on a boat. There was no freezer. There was a fridge but no freezer because people use boats differently in different parts of the world. So, we've really evolved, and the American market's a bit the same. American and Australian market's got some similarities. The American and the Aussies and the Yanks, who are good colleagues, friends of mine in the industry, we've really pushed our suppliers to make the boats fit our markets, not just become for the European market. So look, you've got to push. You've got to push to get a product right, and you'll never get it. There's no perfect boat. That's one of the things that I can say to anyone who gets on and go, say, look, the boat that's going to fit you is the one with the least amount of compromises. Monohulls, multis. There's we can talk about that all day. We can talk about it all year. Power sail. There's positives, negatives. Beachable boats, boats with centreboards, boats with fixed keels, boats with galleys up and galleys down, boats with, different propulsion. It's what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? How long do you want to? Who's going on this boat with you? Just you and your wife, or you and
Who's
your
driving it for you if you're getting that large?
Have you got crew? Have you not got crew? I mean, what's your experience with maintenance? If you the amount of people who've come in to buy a 65-foot cat, mum and dad and 3 kids, no experience with mechanics, electrics, but the pocket's full of money. They got $3 or $4 million bucks. To say to that person the right boat is 1.8 it's 47 feet, you shouldn't buy this boat, is a hard conversation for them, because that's been in their head for years. I'm going to get to this stage in my life, I'm going to go and buy this 60-footer and I'm going to go sailing around the world. And now, you can have that's what I say about directing people to the right boat. If we said, oh, great, give us your money, fantastic boat, see you, John, John's going to end up in a world of pain, up the coast, things breaking, kids are going to get off the boat, the wife's going to end up in divorce. If you can bring them back to the basics and say, this is, buy the smallest boat you can live on for your intended use. That's 45 foot, John. You and the 2 kids, you can look 30, 40 horsepower motors. We can run you through a course. We can teach you how to look after your water maker. You got Volvo or Yanmar looking after you. This will be enjoyable. This for 3 million won't be. This will be a nightmare. Or get a captain.
Yeah, it's like every caravan sales story I've ever heard. They don't ask you the question about what vehicle you pull it with until the contract's signed.
Yeah.
And then it's like, go back with something a little bit bigger, son.
Yeah, and they come up in their car and go, oh, you can't tell me that. So that's, to me, the boat industry, building a business, why is our business one of the largest boat sales groups in the region is, I think, and look, we get out and some new people join us and they find they've come from the aggressive sales business, loving boats, passionate about boats, had boats of their life, but they've been selling another product in their life. They've got the sales skill, but same, in our training, it's if you can't do this, it's not for you. If you can't have a conversation, I know for the $3 million sale, you're going to walk away and you're going to have a weekend in Fiji with your wife if you sign that boat. And if you sign the smaller boat, you're going to have a weekend in Brisbane or something. That one moment can give you a trailing
heartache.
Pushing someone to the right boat, the lesser cost boat, the more suited boat. That relationship lasts forever. That person will come back and tell their friends and come back, and that smaller commission revenue to your business becomes threefold in the next 5 years, instead of one big commission becomes never seen again because the buyer thinks that you've taken advantage.
And then often you gain another customer because of the inbound marketing that they do talking to others, isn't it?
Yeah. So look, we're not perfect at it. You can call me on the bullshit on that, John. We're not. It's not not everything we do.
That's gold dust.
Oh, I think I might be the other way. James is wrong. I think we just get the pan out. There's the gold dust. Make sure index this interview for this point. The gold dust is there.
Yeah. Look, we want to give people the boat, and there's no perfect boat, as I said. We want to give people the boat with the least compromises for the project that they're planning to set about to do. And that could be sailing with Sundays and back. It could be, if it's a powerboat, Fiji and New Zealand. You can't sell them a boat that they've got to do 4 knots to get to Fiji just to make it with 20 jerry cans. You've got to sell them a boat that'll get there in any conditions with 20% reserve.
You're going from here to Fiji, you're going to need a boat that will handle interesting times.
Yeah, conditions. You've done that passage. Get pretty gnarly out there. So it's trying to make sure that we over deliver. On what we say a boat will do. And I love the conversation of people coming from a monohull to a multi-hull to say, look, go and have a sail. The motion is very different. It's not, sailing a monohull upwind's beautiful. We've all sailed dinghies and keel boats and offshore boats, most of our life. That's how I started sailing. But, nothing more beautiful than sailing in a 15 knot offshore breeze, upwind. But if you're going to cruise around the world, it wears you out.
Yeah. Or if there's no wind and you've got the donk going and you've spent 2 days under motor and the thing's like a pig. And
exactly.
Yeah.
And a lot of our market come from that experience to a catamaran. What we remind them is, you're going to have moments going upwind in a catamaran. It's bloody horrible sometimes. But you're following the trade winds. Yeah. You've got time on your hands. You don't have to get up at 8 in the morning and go like you do on the weekend when you sail, because you've got 2 days and you're going to get to that island, you're going to come home, you've got to be at work Monday.
The livability, the amenity, the room, the space you've got on them is just outstanding, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. Look, and when you're cruising, 1 or 2 years, do your numbers. 90% of your time is sitting at anchor.
Yeah,
In a bay, exploring. You know, hiring a car, exploring islands. You know, on the beaches. So you know,
pick your weather window.
Yeah.
Go from point.
That's what
point A
I
to
say.
point B.
There's no perfect boat. If you want the perfect boat, fill your pockets full of heaps of money, get a powerboat, a monohull, a catamaran, get them all, and choose the one that's most suited to that day's weather, you know, and then you've got the perfect fleet of boats.
Well, I think the other thing too is the world is a very, very large place at 4 knots.
Huge.
And all the European explorers will be able to testify to that. We'll work out that number to reach them, and they'll be able to fill in on. They'll be in the next podcast. However, I think one of the other really interesting things out of all of this, though, too, is that 30 years ago, yes, cats had been around, sailing cats, that is, had been around for a while, but about 30 years ago, the sailing cat market overtook all the charter fleets that you're very, very aware of, Mark. Sort of went from maybe there was a catamaran in there to now go and find a monohull to charter. Good luck. But what I really wanted to talk about now was probably the development of the power cat scene. Yes, some of the early power cats arrived and all they were was the sailing cat with the mast locked off. But now we have a situation, especially with Fontaine, Pajot and Quash, where they've gone in for a whole new generation of power cat. This is actually really exciting because in a lot of ways the power cat market is what like the sailing cat market was somewhere around that 30-year ago mark. What have you got to tell us about that sort of development?
Yeah, well, look, back in the late 90s, for sure, there was some pretty interesting concepts coming out. I think Brady here in Australia was a pioneer of the power cat market in this part of the world. We had some of the Kiwis, who was Roger Hill. He's a good friend. I admire him. What he's done with the brand, with his designs. But what historically what buyers today are challenged with power cats is the narrow hulls. You're coming from a monohull, where you've got that big wide berth, Back in those days, people tolerated these little narrow hulls, and because of the range that they went and some of the features and benefits, but it's very hard to sell that style of power cat in the market today, where the hulls are narrow. You can't put a full walk around bed in the hull. This is for a cruising boat, not a weekender. If you want to go and get on a boat with your family and nick off for a year, and really travel and explore. So you'll notice how hull designs change now. You'll notice the waterline can be quite narrow, then they have a big chine flare in them. That's creating volume. If the design is wrong, it can be a pretty uncomfortable seaboat because there's not enough bridge deck, there's not enough flow through the boat. The noise through the hull can be, on monos. You sit on a mono at anchor, and it can be, that front cabin can be very noisy. The cats are better, and a lot of our designs are seamless, quiet as anything. And people are becoming aware of this now. We do sea trials, but I just want to go and sit on the boat and lay in the bed. A sea trial is more turn the boat off, shut the motor down. I just want to sit here and listen. And that can sell the boat or lose the sale, how quiet a boat can be. And, so there's a fine line between volume, and volume can create noise. Noise can, people are bought this fantastic boat, third night out, the wife's going, I can't live on this. I cannot sleep on it. I've seen boats come in and they're fed in the chines. You'll see monos, multis have got a sharp chine to give you the volume. They've fed them in.
Stop the slap.
On different, mainly in the brokerage kind of market with sold boats and things. And then what does that do? Makes it the wettest boat on the planet. So as soon as they start going through the water and do 8 or 10 knots, the spray comes
Water's
over
coming
the bow.
over, they
you can't
lose
stand on the bow.
little bit of lift too, so they've got terrible running energy.
I think the whole industry's been through this design trial and error. You've seen power cats with the spray rail on the front because the water comes over the bow. One thing I'm excited about with Iliad and with Vaya, and we've done the homework. We don't have those issues. I think there's quite a few other competitors in the market that are excellent that don't have those issues, but you've got to be careful. There are still a lot of boats in the market that have these issues, and you don't know until you.
Yeah, and I think the latest generation is probably most identifiable by being narrower and taller.
Correct.
And they've picked up their volume by virtue of head height, and that's allowed the bunks to be further up rather than down on the deck side.
Yeah, bridge deck is key. If you're only using your boat around the Gold Coast Broadwaters between Sydney and Pittwater, over to Roddam and back in Perth or around Port Phillip Bay, most boats will fit the bill. They'll do it. But if you want to travel, and you want to travel day and night for 700-800 miles, if you want to be on the boat, otherwise send a crew. You have to put up with it. But if you want a boat that's comfortable, that feels safe, that is peaceful to be on board doing those long legs, then you've got to look for the 3 or 4 criteria is how the water flows off the hull, how the water flows through the hull, and how quiet the boat is. Particularly sailors going to most of your power cat buyers are coming from sailing. They're people of our generation, older than us, getting to that stage, getting to their 70s, where they go, I'm done. The bride and I can't pull the main up anymore. We can't be bothered. We just want to turn the key and go.
And go at what speed? From sailing to motoring?
Look, generally they will still do the similar speed. If they've come from a good production sailing cat, they're used to doing a 200-mile day, cruising around the world, averaging your 8-9 knots. And remember the cost. They're coming from
That's right.
30 horsepower motors where 60% of the day is spent sailing, a little bit of motoring. They might be coming from three to 500 a month of fuel cost. It's quite a shock to go, if you go to the wrong boat and you start spending 3,000 to 5,000 a month to do the same travelling. That's what shocks a lot of people, because that's where they're sold a boat that they're told to do all these wonderful things, but they don't, the amount of people, brokerage boats have had in saying, I don't know why I bought this boat. I never got explained all these things.
All the hidden costs.
Yeah, now the person that sold them the company that sold them that boat has lost a customer. That boat should be going back to that distributor. They should be selling it through them because they've had a great experience, and right, I want the new one. I want to upsize is downsize. And that's what I say to our crew. Selling someone the wrong boat, you lose a customer forever.
So with that in mind, you've represented a lot of brands, you've sold a lot of boats locally and internationally. What sort of figure of people would come back to you with those boats when they're ready to sell?
Look, I would say in our learning phase, 20 years ago, I would say it was, one in 3, because we're still learning. We're still learning ourselves about going, this is the greatest boat, it'll do everything, John, just, it's better than that one. It's better than that one. But we were young. We were still growing and into our business, and started to realise, hang on, we just told that boat it's the greatest boat on earth. We didn't tell him anything of the negatives on it. There's negatives with every boat. Once we started to explain the negatives, we started to get 35%, 40%. Today it's probably 75, 80% of boats we sell come back to us to sell. Surprisingly, and probably 10% of the rest of those boats haven't been brought back to be sold yet.
Still in the original owner's hands.
Yeah, 10 years, 12, 15, 20 years.
And not to mention the referrals as well, I would assume.
The referrals are incredible, let alone the boat owners who set up YouTube channels and promote our brand and promote our business and come to boat shows with us and just turn up and, you might have met a few of them over the years. We've got a lot of our clients, we call ambassadors. 10% of our sales team are boat owners who have finished their cruising, said, I'm not going back to be an accountant after sailing. I love this industry, and I think I'd like to join you and start helping people get into this. And that's the look of it from a good broker is someone who doesn't go, I want to come and sell boats to make a buck. I want to come and sell boats to give people the opportunity to experience what I've experienced. And they're the ones that are the strongest sales people in our team.
Well, that's the gold dust in the boat sales side, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You've done well getting, and absolute credit to you, not by accident, but getting to the scale that you have, operating in the markets that you have, and providing that stability, I guess, with different currencies, exchange rates, different markets happening at different cycles, having the history, the experience. And you mentioned earlier you've got a 5-year business plan, which I don't know how many companies in Australia have actually got a 5-year business plan. So I mean, and then you can ride out those cycles. You're not looking at it from a yearly basis. You go, well, there's a little bit of a hiccup here. We're looking at it over a 3-year period or whatever. There's so much stability in what you've created.
Yeah. Well, this industry, it has moments, where it explodes and where it implodes, and
and you're dealing with products that have got a very, very long lead time with design and manufacturing, production and release, and
and look,
shipping, yes,
and look, any reputable brand can release a new model and it doesn't nail the market. It's not an improvement on what it's replaced. I think every shipyard I know has done it. They've launched a model that's been a bit of a flop, not through. It's just they thought that market loved this boat so much it was too much like it, or it wasn't a real step up. What works in this market is when you are a little bit bold and you bring something that's quite a step up against what it's replacing. It's like the motor car industry. Look at the boldness in the motor car industry. You look at a car today and you get inside it and it feels like your old Ford Fairlane, yet it's half as long. It's not as wide, and you go, how do they get all this volume in this?
Yeah, boats are the same.
But I think boating's becoming like that, where you've got to walk on and go. I think we all have done it in our life. You walk on a boat, you might not even be in the market, but you walk on a boat and go, this is nice. I like this. Even if you're not a buyer, you want to sit down and just go, I can see myself Morton Island this for a few days. You can get on other boats and you'll go, I feel cold in this boat. I don't feel right, and we're all different. Mm-hmm. That until someone gets to that warm and fuzzy moment sitting on a boat and opens a conversation, that's what excites me about this industry.
Well, that's probably a skill. Sorry, Mike. That's probably a skill too. Knowing the person, reading the person. That comes with time and experience, and knowing what the right fit is for them. Yeah, putting the product and the person together. And
the first hour talking to a boat buyer, don't talk about the boat. Talk about them. What are your experience? Mm. What's your background? I had a tinny when I was a kid, and I've been an accountant for the last 20 years, and my kids sail, but I haven't driven a boat over 20 feet for 35 years. Going, okay, well, so understanding where you are, what's your family situation, what do you want to do? Once you know all this, you can say you're sitting on the wrong boat. Yep. This boat's not going to do that.
Yep.
Mm. It saves you so much time and angst, and you're telling your customer the boat you want, we might have it in our fleet somewhere. That's what you should be looking at. Or no, you need to go and see Jono down on D41. That's the kind of boat you should buy. And that's the best conversation to have with the customer. When that customer goes, and they know you forever. Every time they come to a boat show, they come and say good day because you put them on the right path.
Mm. So has that answered your first question about the young person?
It just crammed 40 years gone into, back to that well.
I guess there was a point that came out of that I actually just wanted to stress for everybody, whether you're a buyer, whether you're wanting to come into the industry, or whether you're a 30-year veteran of the industry. Mark actually indulged me once to go walking through his stand before the show had opened. I was very pressured for time. Mark actually knew that and just waved me on to be able to go and look at a new product ahead of schedule. The reason I bring that up is because at the time, Mark was actually conducting the pre-day boat show briefing for his entire team, which I think was roughly around 25 people manning the stand that day. Now, the reason I mention it is purely because the passion that Mark's been talking about in the last part of the conversation, in fact, for the whole hour-long conversation, was very evident in the way he was delivering it to the team. You know, to say he was a football coach is true. To say he was a manager, if you look at the British football scenario, is also true. But actually, the point that I just wanted to drive out was the passion point, Mark. And I think that if you don't have that, do get out of the industry. And I think you'd agree.
Absolutely, John. You know, if you want to get into this industry, you can make good money in this industry if you do it right. And you can make more money if you do it wrong, unfortunately. You know, there's a lot of people that have been in it as long as I have got bigger houses than I, sitting on Sydney Harbour, but they've disappointed a lot of people on the way. I love I like to walk down Marina and say and have no angst with anyone. I think I say everyone coming into our business, if you do it the right way, it's a slow start. It's not an easy start. I say it's like a big hourglass. You know, you just got to keep putting opportunities in, being honest, transparent, get them into the right boat, not the wrong boat, and it's a 3-year process. I can tell you half our sales team couldn't quite pay the mortgages in the first year. They struggled. You know, we had to help them get through year 1. Year 2, it started to work nearly to say, I can do this full time, I'm fine. 3rd year is when you'll know. 3rd year is when the cycle starts to, you know, the boat you sold in the first year, they're back, and it just evolves to the point. We've got some of our brokers now that we have to help take people off them. They can't handle 40 second-hand boat sales a year, but they've got that audience wanting them to help. So now we're trying to put in support programs to say, look, you know, the most you can handle comfortably, in my opinion, is around 15 new boats a year as an individual. It sounds, you know, it's only one every 3 weeks, but the work involved in showing, sea trialling, if you want to give the right service, you know, as soon as you're trying to do 20 boats a year in the pre-owned market, you'll have 5 or 7 upset customers. You're doing too much. And that's what I'm learning now, is because the scale we're on is now identifying, you know, John, you got too much, you know, we need to take some off you because you know.
And what's that process like doing? What's it
it's
like?
It can be hard because you're taking revenue opportunity,
money,
but it's every person who deals with us gets a questionnaire. Surprisingly, we're 92%, I think, return accuracy now, and we see it before it becomes a problem. You know, and you see someone who's had a great 5 years, and then all of a sudden we're getting these complaints because we go, hang on, look, he's got too much on. So we have to help, you know, take, you know, in saying, look, you know, if you want to make more money, lift up your value of boat sale. That's really what it comes down to. We've got some, you know, some of our team are fantastic at selling $2.5 million boats here. We've got some guys in our team and girls in our team who are brilliant at selling 12, 15, $500,000 boats here. You know, there's no right or wrong. It's what your market is. And if I've got a message to anyone getting into this industry, is stay with what you're passionate about. If you're passionate about powerboats, don't stuff around with sailing boats, you know, because you're not going to give the right advice. You're not going to give the right education. If you're passionate about sailing, stick with sailing boats. Don't try and become a powerboater. You know, there's very few people are good at both that I've met. If you're good at, you know, kind of crude boats, 65 to 100 foot, stay in that market. Don't try and stuff around with a 35-foot day boat because you won't give the buyer the right education because you've really had no experience in that yourself. You've been a super yacht captain or you used to have driving a boat, looking after crews. Stay in that market. Don't try and be a generalist. You know, find specialists in our business, monohull, multi-hull. You know, we've got some guys that are never sailed on a monohull, and I see them list a monohull. I go, what are you doing? Pass it over. So we have a lot of pass over in our business. So I've got an opportunity, I'll give it to the specialist, they get a referral, and the specialist handles the sale. At least the education's right. as best as we're not perfect, but I think we do it pretty well.
Yeah.
But getting people into this industry, it's a wonderful industry to be in. And you know what we lack is young people in this industry. I don't think we've got 2 brokers out of 30 under the age of 32 or something.
Well, I guess in a lot of ways it kind of reminds me of the discussion we were having earlier about the yacht that's parked out behind us. To get going, it's probably like the 70-ton IOR vessel with 150% overlapping headsail. It's something like 1 to 3 knots of very wafty breeze.
Yep.
Be on your game, you will get it moving, and then momentum will take hold and you'll be off and you'll build some apparent. Eventually, there's a big underscore under eventually there. Is that a fair way to assess the situation?
Look, totally. It's, you've got to start somewhere and, you've got to learn the process, and like every boat has a character to itself. You sail an old half-tonner to a modern, race boat, the whole, you can't go dead downwind or you get the rolls, I've seen people sell families old IOR racing boats to go cruise around Australia. It's like, Jesus. And it's got a 2.7 metre keel and they wonder what they're going to go around Australia sitting half a mile off the coast. They can't go anywhere. That's what I hate.
And
That's
the diesel in front of the keel.
That's what disappoints me about this industry is when I see that happen. And only because we've been a victim of it ourselves. I've probably done it myself in my younger days, just not thinking, I need $1, I've got to pay the rent. Going, hang on, that was a silly thing to do. So everyone's done it. But you know what? If we're going to make this industry really, really thrive, the better we get it kind of saying, I don't want to sell you this boat because it's not going to fit you. I know you love it, but as long as you're okay with it, it's fine. I remember one guy in Adelaide wanted to buy Bumblebee. Remember our old mate Scooter, God bless Scooter, and Beth Ann. We were trying to help them move Bumblebee after poor old Scoot's passing. And there was a couple who wanted to buy the boat to go cruising around Australia. Yes. And I had to stop answering his phone calls and emails because he was adamant because the price was right. It would have been a disaster. Imagine sailing Bumblebee with you and you've sailed dinghies, it's an old maxi.
I was just about to say Helsel 2 and Helsel 3 were bought by people at roughly the same time. Helsel 3, of course, with a lifting keel, or actually swinging keel, to be technically correct. And they wanted to go racing, and the people that bought Helsel 2 wanted to go cruising. Swap guys.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
and
Mark,
look, we all do things for a buck, but the best this industry can be is when we start doing things for the satisfaction of boating for the buyer. They're going to have a better experience. They're going to come back to boating. We're all going to get more business from it, and it's going to grow and evolve. So as soon as we can all do that as an industry, we're going somewhere.
So Mark, I'd just like to loop it back to the start. You made a point just before, which was we're lacking young people in the industry. And the first question was about you as a young person in the industry and getting into it. So just before we wrap up, what do you see as a way to encourage or a pathway for people to get into the industry?
Look, it depends what facet of it, whether it's service, whether it's sales, whether it's administration, whether it's operations, whether it's media. This industry's got so many broad parts to be involved in.
But a lot of them come from being on a boat in some way first,
Yeah,
don't
look,
they?
it's a good question, and it's something we're not big enough to do. What I'd love to do is set up some type of training. Riv do it great. They've got the apprentice schemes. Maritimo. Well, we've got some companies doing some wonderful things. Longhurst, Tony Longhurst here is doing a lot of great things for growing the industry. I think as a yacht sales industry, we're not doing enough. And I think that's one of the big areas. If you walk around the boat show, the average age of salespeople are probably, pushing my age, 60. They're not young. Great experience, fantastic to pass on. I'd love to, be involved in a sales training centre. that could be set up. You know,
Sounds like the project for in 5 years' time.
You know, something. Sure, you know, I'm not going to do this forever. Yeah, look, I'd love to be part of that, to educate people about how to get started in sales. And the first thing, you know, the first 3 or 4 weeks of becoming a salesperson is get on boats and get educated. You know, what are the difference? It's not a classroom whiteboard tick the box process. It's let's get on this boat and see how it behaves. See how a cat behaves, how a mono behaves. See what a gyro does to a mono, so you understand what it does. Not I've heard it does that. This is what it does. You know, anchoring, sitting at an anchor, hearing the noises in boats. That month of education is the first foundation. So at least you can say, I've been on that kind of boat. You've got to be careful. That boat's noisy in those conditions. That boat's like that in that. You know, not saying it's not the right boat, but to become a good salesperson, you've got to have. You know, I'm lucky. I've been a crayfisherman. I've sailed Volvo 60s. I've sailed 470s, Pelicans, rolling Taskers, Siska in ocean races. I've done, you know, Noumea yacht races like you guys. You know, I've done all facets of boating, so I'm fortunate.
Yeah, so you're fluent in conversation to do with all types of boats.
I love sailing monos. I love sailing cats. I love power boats. I love power cats. I love it all. You know,
so you're a botanizer, as such.
Make some room on the panel.
Yeah.
Mark's coming on.
Yeah. But certainly, you know, if we can just get buyers into the most least compromised boat for their use, we're going to grow this industry twice as the size. The amount of people I've met, I bought a boat, I had one for 3 years, I'll never do that again. And you have a real dig into them because they bought a boat that was never going to do the job for them, and they got put off.
Yeah.
The more we do that, the we can cut the industry in half.
I like the sound of
Because
that.
they'll go and buy a farm and a tractor instead.
Exactly. Well, it's been a very insightful chat with you today. I've really enjoyed it, actually. We've dived into a few things, picked out a little bit of gold dust here and there.
Thank you. And
picked up some
look,
Bulldust.
I'm happy to. I appreciate the opportunity, and good luck with B&B. We call it B&B.
Absolutely.
It's an exciting new concept, and I wish you guys all the best, and appreciate the opportunity to be invited on for a pretty.
We'll
good
get you back
conversation.
once we start this, once you get that education side started.
Yeah.
Well, that's something we've got to work on. No, I agree. And time. That's all we need also is more time.
Tell me about it.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Mark.
gentlemen.
Thanks,
Good.
Mark. Appreciate it.
Well, that was really, really interesting with Mark Elkington, all the way from a 20-foot shipping container to a global enterprise. Mark, thanks so much for being on Bulwarks and Bulldust. There's your memento cap.
Thanks, John. And thanks for hearing my story. And, it's been a great journey. We are a long way from the finish line yet. Stay tuned for what we're going to do over the next couple of years. Exciting times, great for the industry.